Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The myth went like this. 10 years ago, a human gunslinger walked out of Earth's gravity well and into the criminal underworld of the Outer Rim, and death followed him like smoke from a cigarette. They said he could kill with any weapon that touched his hands, a pistol, a knife, a goddamn dinner fork if necessary. They said crime lords wet themselves when his shadow darkened their doors. They said his name was whispered in 20 languages across 40 systems, always with the same reverence reserved for natural disasters. They were only half right. Paul Kane sat in the neon-soaked back room of the Supernova's End, a dive bar on Kepler Station that smelled of spilled Andromedan whiskey and poor life choices. The bass from the main floor vibrated through the walls, making the amber liquid in his glass ripple like a tiny sea. Smoke curled from the cigarette between his fingers. Real tobacco, earth-grown, worth more than most people made in a month out here. "To another year of not dying," Alan shouted over the music, raising his glass. The scarred Martian had been running freight with Paul for 3 years now, long enough to know the man's reputation, not long enough to know if it was earned. "To Paul Kane," added Lender, the 4-armed Rigelian whose blue skin shimmered under the bar's cheap holograms. "May his enemies continue to die mysteriously before they find him." Paul smiled, that particular half-smile that never quite reached his eyes, and knocked back his drink. The burn felt good, familiar. Real in a way most things weren't anymore. "You know what I heard?" Alan leaned in, his breath thick with alcohol. "I heard there used to be this human, right? Fresh off Earth maybe 10, 15 years back. They say every crime syndicate from here to the Vega system had a price on his head. They say he could put a plasma bolt through a playing card at 200 meters, while drunk, in 0G. "Bullshit," Lender laughed, his 4 arms gesturing wildly. "Humans can barely see straight sober." Paul took a long drag from his cigarette, letting the smoke fill his lungs, holding it like a secret. Through the haze, he watched the crowd in the main bar, Zephyrians with their scaled skin catching the strobe lights, a pair of crystalline Ashanti whose bodies rang like wind chimes when they moved, humans looking soft and pink and utterly out of place among the alien flesh. The music suddenly spiked. Someone had triggered the birthday mix, all thundering bass and screaming synths. Paul recognized it immediately. His friends had remembered after all. "Happy birthday, you mysterious bastard," Alan shouted, signaling the bartender for another round. That's when the fight started. Paul didn't see who threw the first punch, but he saw the Vorthok bouncer's head snap back, green blood spraying from his broken nose. The crystalline Ashanti scattered, their bodies chiming alarm. 2 humans, minors by the look of their rad-scarred faces, were squaring off against 3 Rigelians whose blue skin was flushing purple with rage. "Should we—" Alan started. Paul didn't move from his chair, didn't even set down his drink. His free hand moved with liquid precision, sliding the blaster from the holster of a passing thug who was too focused on the brawl to notice. Without looking, eyes still on the smoke rising from his cigarette, Paul fired twice. The plasma bolt sizzled through the air, so close to a Zephyrian's head that his scales sparked. Both shots hit the overhead lights, plunging that corner of the bar into darkness. The fighters, suddenly blind, stumbled into each other, fists finding friends instead of foes. The bar went silent except for the pounding music. Paul set the blaster on the table, took another drag, and finished his drink. "Holy shit," Lender whispered. The crowd erupted. Credits changed hands. Apparently, there'd been bets on when the birthday boy would finally do something interesting. Paul stubbed out his cigarette and stood, that same half-smile playing on his lips. "I need another drink," he said. That's when they appeared, 2 women with skin black as stellar void, wearing dresses that looked painted on. They moved like dancers or predators or both. One leaned over Paul's table, her perfume thick with alien pheromones. "The hero deserves a reward," she purred in accented English. "I didn't do anything heroic," Paul replied, already reaching for another cigarette. "Even better," the second one said, linking her arm through his. "We prefer the dangerous ones." Alan groaned. "There he goes. Someone get the cosmic earplugs. Paul's about to make some noise." Paul let them lead him toward the stairs, cigarette glowing like a beacon in the dark. He glanced back once, catching Alan's eye. "Don't wait up." The morning after hit like a freight hauler's gravity wake. Paul's head pounded with the kind of hangover that made him consider the sweet embrace of death. The room spun gently, a reminder that Kepler Station's rotation wasn't quite Earth standard. The two women were gone, leaving only the lingering scent of their perfume and a note written in lipstick on the mirror. "Happy birthday, Gunslinger." His stomach growled, a violent, angry sound that demanded attention. Paul stumbled to the sink, splashed recycled water on his face, and tried to remember where the hell you could find actual food on this rust bucket of a station. The hallway outside the pleasure district was a sensory assault. Neon signs advertised everything from gene mods to authentic Earth cuisine, which was never authentic and barely cuisine. Vendors shouted in a dozen languages. The air recyclers couldn't quite mask the smell of too many species packed into too small a space. Paul stopped at a kiosk run by 3 yellow-skinned girls with 3 arms each, Trigelians if he remembered correctly. They giggled when they saw him, whispering to each other in their clicking language. "Food," Paul managed, his voice rough from smoke and whatever had been in those drinks. "Real food. Where?" The girls exchanged glances, their 6 eyes sparkling with mischief. The middle one leaned forward, her 3 hands gesturing in different directions simultaneously. "Oh, hungry human wants meat, yes?" Her accent made the words sound like a song. "Best meat at the market. Very fresh. Very lively." The other 2 erupted in giggles. "Just tell me where," Paul said, lighting a cigarette to mask the station's smell. "Lower level, section 7. Follow the red lights. You'll find what you're looking for." More giggling. One of them made a gesture with her 3 hands that was either directions or something obscene. With Trigelians, it was hard to tell. Paul followed the red lights through the station's bowels, past repair shops and black market stalls, past a preacher screaming about the end times in a language that sounded like grinding gears. The crowds thinned as he descended. The lighting got worse. The smell got better, though. Less rot, more copper. The meat market wasn't what Paul expected. The massive hangar had been converted into an amphitheater. Hundreds of buyers packed the terrace seating. Vorthak merchants with their scales glittering under the harsh lights. Serpentine Covenant members whose bodies coiled around their chairs. Humans looking pale and soft among the alien crowd. The air was thick with alien pheromones, sweat, and something else. Fear. At the center, a stage. On the stage, cages. Paul's cigarette paused halfway to his lips. This wasn't a meat market. It was a flesh market. A slave auction. "First time?" a human to his left asked, mistaking Paul's stillness for shock rather than calculation. "They run these every cycle. Lord Veyron's got the best stock in the sector." Paul's hand moved instinctively to where his weapon should be. Found nothing. He'd left it in the room, too hungover to think straight. Stupid. Sloppy. The kind of mistake that would have gotten him killed 10 years ago. The auctioneer, a tall, impossibly thin creature with too many joints, struck a gavel that sounded like thunder. The crowd quieted. "Lot 47, it announced, its voice somehow both whisper and shout. "Zelani female, unusual coloring, defective for breeding purposes." The cage opened and she was dragged onto the stage. Temple. Paul didn't know her name yet, but he'd never forget that first sight. emerald skin that seemed to capture and reflect the harsh stage lights, hair black as space itself, falling in waves past her shoulders despite the rough handling. Her body, damn, her body was the kind of perfection that started wars, all curves and strength and defiant grace despite the chains. But it was her eyes that stopped his breathing, amber, burning, not pleading, not broken, furious. She stood straight despite the shackles, chin raised, staring down the crowd like she was the one sitting in judgment. Lord Veyron slithered onto the stage, and slithered was the only word for it. His species had evolved from something serpentine, his lower body a mass of coils while his torso remained humanoid. Silk robes in colors that hurt to look at draped his form. His face was almost beautiful, in the way a weapon could be beautiful. As you can see, Veyron's voice carried without amplification, smooth as poisoned honey, the specimen is physically adequate. However, she has proven resistant to breeding protocols. 17 attempted pairings, 17 rejections. In Zilani culture, such defiance marks defective genetics. The crowd murmured. Someone laughed, harsh and ugly. So, Veyron continued, running a scaled hand along Temple's jaw. She snapped her teeth at him, and he pulled back with a smile. We offer her for alternative purposes. Labor, perhaps. Entertainment, certainly. Or, he paused for effect, meat. Zilani flesh is considered a delicacy in certain systems. More laughter. Crude comments in multiple languages. Temple's eyes swept the crowd, and for a moment, just a moment, they locked with Paul's. He saw it then. Not fear, not desperation. A challenge. I dare you, those amber eyes said. I dare you to be different. Paul took a long drag from his cigarette, held it, then exhaled slowly. The smoke rose toward the industrial ceiling, and with it, his hand. 50,000 credits. The room went silent. Every head turned. The cigarette glowed between Paul's fingers like a small star. Veyron's perfect composure cracked, just slightly. I'm sorry. Did you say 50,000 credits? Paul repeated, his voice carrying the kind of certainty that had once made crime lords reconsider their life choices. For the Zilani woman. Sir, that's 10 times the starting bid. Then I guess I win. Paul dropped the cigarette, crushed it under his boot, and started walking toward the stage. The crowd parted like water. Whether from respect or fear, he didn't care. Veyron's coils tightened, a sign of agitation. Might I ask your intentions with such defective merchandise? Paul climbed onto the stage, stopped just outside of Veyron's striking distance. Up close, Temple was even more striking. She watched him with those burning eyes, not backing down an inch. My intentions, Paul said, pulling out his credit chip, are none of your damn business. The curse word hung in the air like a slap. Veyron's forked tongue flicked out, tasting Paul's scent. Human, he said, like it was an insult. Very well, 50,000 credits. The transaction completed with a soft chime. Veyron handed over the control rod for Temple's shackles, his smile all teeth and malice. Enjoy your purchase. Do try not to let her bite. Zilani teeth can be quite septic. Paul took the rod, looked at it with disgust, then dropped it on the stage. The clatter echoed through the silent amphitheater. He pulled out a small plasma cutter from his jacket, the one useful thing he'd remembered to bring, and sliced through Temple's collar. It fell away with a hiss of severed metal. She rubbed her neck, green skin already showing bruises, never taking her eyes off him. So, she said, and her voice was smoke and honey and danger all at once, accented but clear. The human wants exotic meat? How original. Paul lit another cigarette, taking his time, letting her see he wasn't rattled. I prefer my dinner conversation more stimulating. Touch me unnecessarily, and you'll learn how sharp Zelani teeth really are." Noted. He cut through her wrist restraints but left the ankle chains for now. They'd attract less attention on the way out. "Can you walk, or do I carry you out of here?" She took a step forward, deliberately close enough that he could smell something like cinnamon on her skin. Her hip brushed his, testing, challenging. "I can walk. The question is whether you can keep up." Behind them, Veyron laughed, a sound like silk being torn. "Oh, this will be entertaining. Do let me know how she tastes human." Paul turned, fixing Veyron with a look that had once made a Vorthak crime boss apologize and return stolen goods. "If you follow us, if you even think about following us, you'll find out why certain people in certain systems still check under their beds for humans before they sleep." The threat should have been ridiculous. One hungover human against Lord Veyron's entire operation. But something in Paul's voice, some echo of that decade-old legend, made the serpent's smile falter. "We shall see," Veyron said. Paul offered Temple his arm. She looked at it like it might be poisoned, then slowly, deliberately, placed her hand on his forearm. Her touch was warm, warmer than human normal, and her fingers pressed just hard enough to feel the muscle underneath. They walked out together, through the silent crowd, her chains rattling with each step. Paul could feel every eye on them, could hear the whispers starting already. The human who paid a fortune for defective goods. The woman who refused her purpose. "Why?" Temple asked when they reached the corridor outside, her voice low enough that only he could hear. Paul paused to cut her ankle chains, the plasma cutter making short work of the metal. She stretched, cat-like, testing her freedom. "Maybe I have a thing for lost causes," he said. She studied him, those amber eyes seeing too much. "No, that's not it. You recognize something." "Yeah, well." Paul started walking again, checking corners from old habit. "Recognition's a two-way street, princess." "Don't call me princess." "What should I call you?" "Temple." She fell into step beside him, matching his pace exactly. "My name is Temple. Paul Kane. I know who you are." At his sharp look she smiled, the first real smile, dangerous and knowing. "Oh yes, Paul Kane. Your legend reaches even to Zelani space, the human gunslinger who killed 43 syndicate members in one night, the ghost who walks through walls and bullets alike." Stories get exaggerated. "Do they?" She stopped walking, forcing him to turn. "Tell me, Paul Kane, was it 43 or was it more?" Before he could answer, voices echoed from behind them, angry voices, getting closer. "Hell," Paul muttered, hand going to where his weapon should be and finding nothing. Temple smiled wider, showing those teeth everyone kept warning him about. "What's wrong, gunslinger? Forget your gun?" "We need to move." "No," she said, rolling her shoulders. "We need to fight." The first Vorthak rounded the corner, scales glittering, plasma blade already igniting. The amphitheater erupted the moment Paul and Temple disappeared through the exit. Lord Veyron's coils writhed across the stage, scales scraping against metal with a sound like knives being sharpened. His perfect composure, that mask of serpentine superiority, cracked and fell away. Silence. The word hit the crowd like a physical force. Conversations died. The auctioneer's many joints locked in place. Even the caged slaves stopped their whimpering. Veyron rose to his full height, torso elevated 12 feet above the stage, silk robes billowing. His forked tongue tasted the air, finding the lingering scent of tobacco and human sweat. When he spoke again, his voice carried the kind of calm that preceded massacres. "Ladies, gentlemen, esteemed colleagues of the flesh trade." He glided to the edge of the stage, addressing the assembled nobility and crime lords. "You have just witnessed an insult, not merely to me, but to the natural order itself. A Vorthak merchant in the front row shifted nervously, scales rattling. Lord Veyron, surely a human. Veyron's laugh was poison poured over silk. A soft, pink, barely evolved primate just challenged my authority in my own house, dropped my control rod like garbage, threatened me. He lifted a crystal goblet from a servant's tray, the red wine inside catching the lights like blood. So I make you all a promise, a vow, witnessed by the assembled powers of 7 systems. He raised the goblet high. Before this moon sun sets, that human's head will decorate my dinner table. His skull will hold wine for my guests, and the Zalani bitch. His smile revealed too many teeth. She'll watch from a cage as we feast. The crowd roared approval. Credits changed hands as bets were placed on how long the human would last. Someone started a chant in Vorthak that translated roughly to "blood for the Lord." Veyron drained his goblet and hurled it against the wall where it shattered like stars. "Release the hunters. All of them. 20,000 credit bonus for whoever brings me Paul Kane alive." He paused, tongue flicking. "I want to hear him scream." The Vagrant was built for cargo, not comfort. The living quarters consisted of one cabin barely large enough for a single bunk, a shower unit that required creative positioning, and a galley where 2 people couldn't stand without touching. Paul discovered this last fact when Temple reached over him for a water packet. Her breast pressed against his back, warm even through both their clothes. He went rigid. Not from discomfort, but from the sudden rush of heat that had nothing to do with the ship's struggling climate control. She lingered a heartbeat longer than necessary, her breath tickling his neck. "In my culture," she murmured, lips close enough that he felt the words as much as heard them, "such proximity indicates intention." Paul's hand tightened on the coffee bulb he'd been holding. The recycled stuff tasted like burnt rubber, but it gave him something to focus on besides the way her body fitted against his. "In mine, it means the ship's too damn small." "Is it?" She pulled back slowly, deliberately, her fingers trailing across his shoulder. "Strange. It seems just right to me." She moved to the navigation console, bending over the star charts in a way that made her intentions crystal clear. That emerald skin seemed to shimmer under the cabin lights, shifting between jade and sea foam with each breath. Paul found himself tracking the color changes, wondering what each shade meant. "Stop staring and plot a course," Temple said without turning around. "Unless you'd prefer Veyron's hunters catch us while you're distracted by my ass." "I'm not—" She looked over her shoulder, one eyebrow raised, smile wicked. "No? My mistake. Must be another human male whose pulse I can hear accelerating from across the room." Paul lit a cigarette to buy time, letting the familiar ritual calm his nerves. "You can hear my pulse?" "Among other things." She straightened, turned, moved closer. "Your breathing changes when I'm near. Your pupils dilate. Your skin flushes here." She reached out, fingertip barely grazing his throat. "When you want something you think you shouldn't have." The cigarette trembled between his fingers. "You're analyzing me?" "Learning you." She plucked the cigarette from his hand, took a drag, inexpertly, coughing slightly, then placed it back between his lips. The indirect kiss wasn't subtle. "My people believe in studying what we intend to claim. And you intend to claim me? Don't you already belong to someone else?" Her amber eyes held his. "The ghost in your head. The one you see when you look at me sometimes." Paul turned away, busying himself with the navigation panel. "We need to reach Nexus Station. Fuel and supplies." "Of course." Temple's voice carried amusement and something else. Understanding, maybe. "Run, Paul Kane. See how far it gets you." That night, the heating system failed. Paul woke to find Temple shivering in the single bunk, her skin pale green like winter jade. Zalani biology, he remembered from somewhere, didn't handle cold well. Their planet was tropical, their blood literally running hotter than humans. "Damn, you're freezing." He grabbed the emergency thermal blanket from storage, wrapping it around her. "Share," she managed through chattering teeth. "B-body heat." It wasn't a seduction. She was genuinely hypothermic. Paul slid under the blanket, pulling her against him. She curled into his warmth like a cat, all that earlier bravado gone. "Just for warmth," he said. "Of course." Her hand found his under the blanket, fingers intertwining. Nothing more. They lay in the dark, breathing synchronized, her back pressed to his chest. She stopped shivering after a while but didn't pull away. Neither did he. "Tell me about her," Temple whispered. Paul tensed. "Who?" "The woman I remind you of, the one you couldn't save." "How do you—" "The way you look sometimes, like you're seeing a ghost." "I know that look." Her thumb stroked across his knuckles. "I wear it too." Paul was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Maria. Her name was Maria. My partner, back when I thought I could be something more than a killer." "What happened?" "I chose the mission. Thought I could save her after. There was no after." Temple turned in his arms, facing him in the dark. Her eyes caught what little light existed, glowing faintly amber. "I'm not her. I know. Do you? Because sometimes you look at me like you're trying to resurrect the dead." Paul's hand came up, cupping her face. "When I look at you, I see someone who refused to be owned, who fought back, who survived." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I see Temple. Just Temple." She leaned into his touch, eyes closing. "My people pair for life. Did you know that? When we choose, it's forever. That's why they tried to force me. They thought if they could just make me bond with someone suitable. But you refused." 17 times. She laughed, bitter. "They brought me their finest males, warriors, scholars, princes. I bit the last one so hard he'll carry the scar forever." "Why?" She opened her eyes and they were liquid fire. "Because I wanted to choose. Because love without choice is just another kind of slavery." The word slavery hit Paul like ice water. 20 years ago. The memories came at night, usually. But here, holding Temple while she spoke of slavery, they crashed over him like a wave. 6 years old, sold to pay his parents' debts to the Corsair Syndicate. The smell of the auction house. Different planet. Same stench of fear and greed. The way the chains were too big for his small wrists, how they'd rubbed his skin raw. Baroness Thorne bought him for her estate on Helios Prime. She liked pretty things, and Paul had been pretty then. Big brown eyes, dark hair that curled when it grew long. A pet for her and her friends, the noble ladies who found Earth children exotic. They taught him to serve drinks at their parties, to light their cigarettes with steady hands, to stand still while they ran fingers through his hair, cooing over how soft humans were, how warm. 10 years old. Again, Little Wolf. Duchess Kane, whose name he'd later steal, held the antique pistol out to him. "Show me how steady those hands are." She wore black leather gloves that creaked when she moved, perfume that cost more than most people's homes. She'd positioned herself behind him, body pressed close, guiding his arms. "Shooting is like sex, darling," she purred in his ear while her friends laughed. "It's all about tension and release, control and surrender, feel the weapon, become it." The target was 40 feet away. A playing card, the Queen of Hearts. Paul fired, perfect center. "My deadly little boy," she laughed, kissing his cheek, leaving lipstick like blood. "What will you become, I wonder?" 15 years old, he'd become valuable. The ladies had trained him too well. Not just shooting, he could fight, seduce, kill. They started selling his services. Assassination one night, warming someone's bed the next. They'd made him into a weapon that looked like a boy, acted like a man, felt like nothing at all. The night of the rebellion changed everything. Baroness Thorne was hosting a gala. All the families who'd used him over the years gathered in one place. They dressed him in a suit that cost more than a ship, gave him a gun to show off his skills to potential buyers. Paul had smiled, that same half-smile he still wore, and put a bullet through the Baroness's skull. Then the Duchess. Then every single person who'd ever held his chain. 17 kills in under a minute. The authorities called it a massacre. Paul called it freedom. He'd taken the Duchess's surname, Kane, as a trophy, or maybe a reminder. Present. Paul? Temple's voice pulled him back. Where did you go? He realized his hand had tightened on her waist, probably too hard. Sorry. Old ghosts. She studied his face in the dark. You were a slave too, weren't you? He didn't answer, but she read it in his silence. That's why you bought me. Not guilt about Maria. Not some hero complex. Her hand came up to his face, mirroring his earlier gesture. You saw yourself in chains and couldn't walk away. Maybe. How long? 9 years. How did you? I killed them. All of them. The words came out flat, emotionless. They taught me to shoot, thinking they were making a better product. They made their own executioner instead. Temple was quiet for a moment. Then, good. It was the perfect response. Not sympathy, not horror, just acceptance. Veyron thinks he's hunting us, Paul said. He's wrong. The moment he threatened you, he became prey. He just doesn't know it yet. Is that a promise? That's a fact. Paul pulled her closer, decision crystallizing. I lost everything I cared about once, spent years as property. I won't let it happen again. Not to you. Not to us. Us? Her voice was soft, wondering. Unless you're planning to run at Nexus Station. And miss watching you kill Lord Veyron? She laughed, the sound warming him more than the blanket. Not a chance, gunslinger. Nexus Station was a crossroads, 5 major trade routes converging on a massive structure that looked like a metal spider eating a moon. Every species, every crime, every possibility existed somewhere in its corridors. Temple had insisted on going ahead to scout the black market. I know these people. You'll stand out. Paul watched her disappear into the crowd, unease crawling up his spine. Something felt wrong. The station was too quiet for this time of cycle, too many eyes tracking their movement. He found her in a bar called the Void's Edge, and his blood turned to fire. She sat at a corner table with an Ashanti warrior, 8 feet of crystalline muscle and arrogance. The alien's hand rested on her thigh, possessive. His other hand tangled in her hair as he kissed her neck. Temple's eyes were half closed, a soft sound escaping her lips. Then she looked directly at Paul. Her amber eyes were clear, calculating. She wasn't lost in passion. She was testing him, seeing if he'd walk away, if his pretty words about us meant anything when challenged. The Ashanti noticed Paul's approach, smiled with too many teeth. Move along, human. The lady's occupied. Paul didn't speak, didn't need to. He grabbed the warrior's crystalline hand, the one on Temple's thigh, and twisted. The crack echoed through the bar like a gunshot. The Ashanti screamed, a sound like breaking glass. Mine, Paul said. One word, but it carried the weight of a blood oath. Temple's eyes dilated, her skin flushing deeper green. Prove it. The bar erupted. Turns out the Ashanti had friends. 6 of them, all armed, all angry. The bartender dove for cover as plasma bolts seared the air where Paul's head had been. Temple moved like water, like violence given form. She flowed from her chair, grabbed a bottle, shattered it against an attacker's skull. Green blood and alcohol mixed on the floor, making it slick. Paul had acquired someone's pistol. He didn't remember taking it, muscle memory handling the details. 3 shots, 3 bodies. He and Temple moved in perfect synchronization, covering each other's blind spots without communication. A Vorthak with a vibro blade came at Paul from behind. Temple intercepted, taking the blade in her shoulder instead of letting it find Paul's spine. Her blood was darker than he'd expected, almost black in the bar's neon light. "Why?" Paul demanded, pressure on her wound as they took cover behind an overturned table. "Because you're mine too, you stupid human." She was panting, pain evident, but her eyes blazed with something fiercer than agony. "I choose you. Understand? I choose you." More hunters poured in. Veyron's people. Paul recognized the serpent head tattoos. "Can you run?" Paul asked. "Can you shoot?" He smiled, dangerous and real. "Watch me." What followed was why legends were born. Paul Kane with a stolen gun and something to protect. Every shot perfect, even while moving, even while half-carrying Temple. Bodies dropped like dominoes. The survivors would speak of it in whispers. The human who couldn't miss, who killed with the casual grace of breathing. They made it to the docking ring, Temple's blood leaving a trail. As the vagrant's airlock sealed behind them, she collapsed against him. "I need to see the wound," Paul said. "Is that just an excuse to get my shirt off?" "Temple. Because it's working." In the med bay, Paul's hands were gentle but clinical as he cleaned the wound. The blade had gone deep but missed anything vital. Temple watched his face as he worked, reading the micro-expressions. "You've done this before." "Too many times." He applied the bio-seal, the foam hissing as it expanded. "This will scar." "Good. I want to remember." His hand stilled on her ribs. "Remember what?" "The first time I bled for someone by choice." The biomonitors beeped softly. The ship's engines hummed, and Temple's skin began to change, subtle at first, then more pronounced. The jade green shifted to something deeper, richer, with veins of gold appearing like rivers on a map. "That's new," she gasped. "What is?" "My skin. It only does this when—" She trailed off, embarrassed for the first time since he'd met her. "When what?" "When someone is genetically compatible, and when I—" She took a breath. "When I want them, really want them. It's involuntary, like blushing, but more." Paul's hand was still on her ribs. He could feel her heart racing, matching his own. "Temple. I know. You still see her sometimes. Maria." "No." He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I told you. I see you. Just you. Fierce, impossible, magnificent you." She leaned into his touch, eyes fluttering closed. Dangerous words, gunslinger. "True ones." An alarm shattered the moment. Proximity warning. Paul checked the scanner and cursed. 3 ships, coming fast. Temple pulled her torn shirt back on, wincing. "Veyron?" "Has to be." Paul was already moving to the cockpit. "Strap in. This is going to get rough." The first missile missed by meters. The second didn't. The vagrant bucked like a kicked horse, artificial gravity flickering. Paul fought the controls, Temple working the defensive systems despite her injury. "Can we jump?" she asked. "Not with them this close. The wake would—" The view screen lit up. Lord Veyron's face filled their vision, larger than life, beautiful and terrible. "Paul Kane." His voice was silk over steel. "You've led me on quite the chase, but playtime's over." "Veyron." Paul's hand found his cigarettes, lit one with studied calm. "How's your man's hand? Still attached?" The serpent's perfect features twisted. "You dare—" "I dare a lot of things, like promising to mount your head on my wall." Veyron laughed, the sound making Temple shiver. "Bold words for a dead man. Do you know what she is, human? What you're protecting?" "I know she's not yours. Her genetic code carries the key to Zelani fertility, their entire species' survival. She's worth more than entire systems. Veyron's tongue flicked out. Surrender her, and I'll make your death quick. Paul stood, pulling Temple against him. She fit perfectly, her back to his chest, his arm around her waist. When he spoke, his voice was low, dangerous, a promise and a threat. Come and take her. Temple melted into him, her hand covering his. This wasn't performance anymore. The heat between them was real, electric, dangerous. Together, she whispered. Together. The transmission cut. 3 ships closed in, and Paul Kane smiled, the kind of smile that had once made crime lords pray. The hunt was over. The war was about to begin. The engines died with a whimper, not a roar. Paul cut power to the Vagrant's main drive, letting momentum carry them into the tractor beam's embrace. Through the viewport, Lord Veyron's fortress grew larger, a crystal palace carved into an asteroid spinning slowly against the stars. Its docking bay yawned open like a serpent's mouth. You're insane, Temple said, but her voice carried admiration rather than fear. She stood beside him at the controls, her skin still showing those gold veins from earlier, desire mixed with adrenaline. Walking into his stronghold, no backup, no escape plan. Who says I don't have a plan? Paul checked his antique pistol, the one he'd kept hidden for 20 years, a trophy from Duchess Kane's collection. 7 bullets left. He'd need them all. Care to share? He turned to her, catching her chin between thumb and forefinger. You trust me? With my life, apparently. Then follow my lead. And Temple. His thumb brushed her lower lip. Whatever I say in there, whatever I do, remember its performance. Even if you beg, especially if I beg. The tractor beam pulled them through the atmospheric barrier. The docking bay was massive, built to intimidate. Gold fixtures, marble floors, slaves in silk attending to ships worth more than planets. And the audience Veyron had assembled. Damn, Paul muttered, counting the crowd. He invited everyone. 300 guests, maybe more. Crime lords from 7 systems, slave traders, arms dealers. The entire underground aristocracy gathered to watch Lord Veyron humiliate the human who dared challenge him. Perfect, Temple said, and Paul heard the predator in her voice. More witnesses. The boarding party consisted of 20 guards, Vorthak muscle in ceremonial armor, plasma rifles charged and ready. They dragged Paul and Temple from the ship, making a show of it for the crowd. Easy with the merchandise, Paul said, then let his voice crack, let fear creep in. Please, we surrender. No need for violence. The guards laughed. One of them, scales painted gold for the occasion, backhanded Paul hard enough to split his lip. Blood ran down his chin. Temple snarled, lunging forward, but Paul caught her arm. No, he whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. It's over. We lost. The crowd ate it up. Applause rippled through the assembled nobility as the mighty Paul Kane hung his head in defeat. They were marched through corridors of impossible luxury, walls embedded with precious gems, floors that sang beneath their feet, air that tasted of jasmine and credits. Every step was choreographed humiliation, the guards making sure to parade them past as many witnesses as possible. The throne room, because of course Veyron had a throne room, stretched the length of a city block. The ceiling was transparent aluminum, offering a view of the stars. The floor was polished obsidian that reflected everything like dark water, and at the center, coiled on a dais of white marble, waited Lord Veyron. He dressed for the occasion, silk robes in impossible colors, ultraviolet and infrared somehow visible to the naked eye. His scales had been polished until they gleamed like oil. The crown on his head was simple gold, understated, which somehow made it worse. Paul Kane. Veyron's voice filled the space like poisoned honey. The legendary gunslinger. on his knees at last. The guards forced them down. The obsidian was cold through Paul's clothes, hard against his knees. He kept his head bowed, shoulders shaking. To anyone watching, a broken man. Temple knelt beside him, and he felt rather than saw her smile. She leaned close, her lips brushing his ear in what looked like a gesture of comfort. "You look too good in chains, Paul Kane," she whispered, her breath hot against his skin. "Careful, or I might believe it." He answered without moving his lips, the barest sub-vocalization. "Wait until the dance begins." Veyron slithered down from his dais, his coils making no sound on the obsidian. The crowd pressed closer, hungry for the show. "Look at me, human." Paul raised his head slowly, let his eyes go wide with what looked like terror. "Lord Veyron, please. I see now what I am, just a worm. Let me kneel properly. Let me kiss your coils, prove my submission. I'll lick the dust from your scales if it pleases you. Only spare me. Spare us." The room exploded with laughter. Nobles clutched their sides. Someone was already recording, broadcasting this across the networks. The fearsome Paul Kane, begging like a dog. Veyron's forked tongue flicked out, tasting Paul's fear, or what he thought was fear. "Oh, this is delicious. Do go on, human. Beg more." "I was wrong to challenge you," Paul continued, his voice cracking perfectly on cue. "I'm nothing, less than nothing, a soft, pathetic, earth-born fool who thought he could stand against a god." "A god?" Veyron preened. "Continue. You are perfection, power incarnate. I see that now. Please, Lord Veyron, let me serve. Let me be your dog, your pet, your anything. Just please." Temple made a sound, to the audience, disgust at his weakness. But Paul heard the suppressed laugh underneath. "Unchain them," Veyron commanded. The guards hesitated. "My lord? Do it. I want everyone to see the human grovel freely. No chains forcing him. Pure, willing submission." The shackles fell away with a musical chime. Paul rubbed his wrists, then stood slowly, and everything changed. The cowering was gone. He moved with fluid grace, each gesture deliberate, aristocratic. The crowd's laughter died as Paul straightened to his full height, and for the first time they really looked at him. Not just another scruffy trader, not just another human. Paul reached into his jacket with theatrical slowness, and 20 guards raised their weapons. But all he pulled out was a cigarette and an antique lighter, real flame, not plasma. He lit it with a flourish, the orange glow catching his features in profile. "You want contrition, Lord Veyron?" His voice had changed, too, cultured now, each word precisely chosen. "Allow me to entertain you properly. Allow me to remind this distinguished gathering what humans are really for." He took a long drag, then exhaled, the smoke forming perfect rings that drifted toward the ceiling. It was a party trick, something the Duchess had taught him when he was 12, but in this moment it became art. "What are you doing?" Veyron's voice carried warning. "What you wanted." Paul began to move, not quite walking, not quite dancing, something in between. "You wanted submission, but submission without style? That's just defeat, and you deserve better than that, don't you?" Each step was calculated, each gesture pulled from 20 years of muscle memory. He moved through the crowd like smoke himself, letting his fingers trail across a goblet here, a silk sleeve there, never quite touching anyone, but making them lean toward him, wanting contact. "My education was extensive," Paul continued, his voice carrying despite its softness. "Would you like to know who taught me? Baroness Thorn of Helios Prime. Perhaps you knew her. Dead now, unfortunately. Bullet to the brain at her final party." The crowd stirred. That massacre was legend. Duchess Kane of the Outer Reach, also dead, also at that same party. Strange coincidence. Paul smiled, showing teeth. She taught me that shooting is like sex, all about tension and release. He'd circled back to the center now, where Temple waited. She'd been forced to her knees again, bound in light chains that turned her skin to liquid gold where they touched. But she wasn't playing victim. She watched him with naked hunger, lips parted. "My gods," she breathed loud enough for the front rows to hear, "you're beautiful when you're dangerous." Paul winked at her, then turned back to Varen. "They made me to be perfect, the ideal pet, deadly and decorative in equal measure." Another drag of the cigarette. "Would you like a demonstration?" Varen's coils shifted, spreading wider, dominance display but also fascination. "Show me." Paul began to really move then. It was the dance they'd taught him, the one he'd performed at 100 parties for 100 leering nobles. Part seduction, part threat, every motion designed to captivate and disturb. He made love to the air itself, turned violence into art. The cigarette became a prop. Sometimes a lover's finger tracing invisible skin, sometimes a knife cutting through space. The smoke wreathed him like a shroud, parted like curtains, became part of the performance. And through it all, he was positioning himself. Every flourish brought him closer to the perfect spot. The acoustics of the throne room would carry a gunshot beautifully from right there. "Magnificent," Varen hissed. "Come closer, human. Show me what else those teachers gave you." Paul obeyed, flowing into the circle of Varen's coils. The Serpent Lord could crush him in seconds from here, but it also meant Varen couldn't dodge. "Kneel," Varen commanded. Paul sank to his knees with elegant grace, head tilted back, cigarette still glowing between his fingers. The same posture from his memories, a boy in chains kneeling for monsters who thought they owned him, but his eyes burned with arrogant brilliance. "You wanted my submission," Paul purred, voice carrying to every corner of the throne room. "What you get is my stage." The words hung in the air like an execution order. Varen began to pull back, survival instinct finally overriding arousal, but Paul was already moving. The pistol came from his sleeve in one smooth motion, the Duchess's antique, polished chrome catching the light like a mirror. He pressed it to his lips in a mockery of a kiss, tasting gun oil and memory. 17 nobles taught me to serve," he said. "Tonight, I repay them with your blood." The first shot took Varen between the eyes. The sound was enormous in the throne room, echoing off obsidian and crystal. Varen's perfect features disappeared in a spray of scale and bone. His massive body convulsed, coils thrashing, smashing into pillars and sending nobles screaming. But Paul was already moving, flowing through the chaos like death itself. Second shot. The Vorthok guard captain, skull exploding like ripe fruit. Third shot. A slave trader who'd been laughing loudest, his laughter now a wet gurgle. Fourth shot. An arms dealer reaching for a weapon, hand and head destroyed in one impossible ricochet. The crowd panicked, stampeding for exits, but Paul had chosen his position perfectly. The bottleneck at the main door meant they crushed against each other, easy targets. Fifth shot. A crime boss who'd supplied children to the markets. Sixth shot. His lieutenant trying to use a slave as shield. Temple had broken free of her light chains. They were designed for show, not for holding someone who knew their frequency. Her skin blazed gold-green as she flowed into the massacre, using a guard's dropped vibroblade with deadly precision. "With me!" she called out, severing someone's spine with casual grace. "With you," Paul confirmed, taking his seventh and final shot. This one was special. A duchess from the inner systems who collected human children. Paul had been saving her for last. The bullet took her in the throat, and she fell into the obsidian floor's reflection, drowning in her own image. The antique pistol was empty now, but Paul had acquired others. Guard weapons, nobles' decorative pieces suddenly turned functional. He moved through the throne room like he had at 15, precise, beautiful, obscene in his efficiency, and Temple matched him step for step. They fought like dancers, like lovers, like two halves of the same weapon. When Paul went high, she went low. When she spun left, he covered right. Bodies fell around them like rain. The slaughter took 17 minutes. When silence finally settled over the throne room, the obsidian floor was hidden beneath a lake of multicolored blood. 300 of the underground's most powerful were dead or dying. An entire criminal infrastructure erased in less time than it took to smoke a cigarette. Paul stood at the center of the carnage, breathing hard, clothes soaked with blood, most of it not his. Temple pressed against his back, her breath hot on his neck, her body thrumming with adrenaline and something else. "We just destroyed the entire slaver network," she said, wonder in her voice. "Good riddance." Paul pulled out his last cigarette, miraculously unbroken, and lit it with shaking hands. Not from fear or regret, from the sheer release of it. 20 years of carrying those ghosts, and now they could rest. Temple turned him to face her, her hands leaving bloody prints on his jaw. "You beautiful, deadly man, you planned this from the beginning." From the moment Veyron made it personal. He offered her the cigarette. She took a drag, coughing slightly. She still hadn't gotten the hang of it, then handed it back. "We need to go. Their ships will have automated distress signals." In a moment. Paul pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "Temple, there's something I need to tell you. That you're not just some traitor, that you're actually the heir to a mining empire?" She smiled at his shocked expression. "I can read shipping manifests, Paul. The Kane Mining Consortium. They've been looking for their lost heir for 20 years. You knew? I suspected. Confirmed it when I saw how you moved tonight. Only someone raised in real aristocracy could fake it that well." Her hand slipped under his shirt, finding skin. "Makes sense now, why you had the credits to buy me, why you could afford to throw it all away." "I didn't throw anything away. I got everything I wanted." His hand covered hers, pressing it against his heart. "Temple, you're—" She kissed him, hard and desperate and tasting of smoke and blood and freedom. When they broke apart, her skin was glowing again, those gold veins pulsing with her heartbeat. "Mine," she said against his lips. "You're mine, Paul Kane." "Yours," he agreed. Then, because timing was everything, "We really do need to go now." They ran through the palace, past cowering servants and abandoned feast halls. The hangar was chaos. Survivors trying to flee, ships crashing into each other in panic. But the vagrant waited untouched, like she knew her captain would return. As they lifted off, the palace security finally responded. Too late. Automated turrets fired, but Paul flew like he fought, all instinct and impossible grace. They broke free into open space as the fortress erupted in violence behind them. Apparently some of the survivors had decided to settle old scores while they had the chance. "Where to?" Temple asked, working the navigation console. "Anywhere but here. Pick a direction and burn hard." She chose seemingly at random, but Paul noticed she'd aimed them toward Zelani space, toward her home. "Temple, I know we can't go there. Not yet. But someday." She touched her stomach, a gesture so subtle he almost missed it. "Someday, our children should see where half of them comes from." Paul's cigarette fell from nerveless fingers. "Children? Temple, are you—" "Not yet." She smiled, that dangerous, promising smile. "But after tonight, after watching you destroy an empire in 17 minutes, my body's made its choice. The genetic compatibility markers are screaming." She moved to his lap, straddling him in the pilot's chair. "I'm going to have your children, Paul Kane. Several of them, and they're going to be magnificent. That's not a decision you make lightly." "No, it's not." Her hands framed his face. I told you, my people mate for life. When we choose, it's forever. I chose you the moment you dropped that control rod on the stage. Everything else was just foreplay." Paul laughed, sudden and genuine. "Foreplay? We just killed 300 people. And wasn't it romantic?" She was laughing too, high on adrenaline and possibility. The couple that slays together, stays together. An alert chimed. Long-range sensors showed ships converging on their position, not pursuit, but investigation. News of the massacre would spread fast. "We're about to become the most wanted people in 7 systems," Paul noted. "Good, let them come." Temple stood, pulling him up with her. "They think they're hunting us. They don't realize we're done running." 5 years later, the sun on Haven Colony was different from Earth's, older, redder, painting everything in shades of gold and copper. Paul sat on the porch of their homestead, cleaning his pistol with practiced ease. Not the antique that was mounted on the wall inside, retired after its greatest performance. This was newer, custom-made, perfectly balanced. "Papa, watch!" Tim, 4 years old with his mother's green skin and his father's sharp eyes, executed a perfect forward roll across the grass. His sister Emma, 2 minutes younger but already taller, applauded with all the enthusiasm her tiny hands could manage. "Very good," Paul called out. "Now show me the stance I taught you." Both children dropped into a combat position that would have made their training instructors proud, if they'd had any besides their parents. Temple emerged from the house, moving carefully. 8 months pregnant with twins this time, she still carried herself like a dancer, all grace despite the weight. She lowered herself into the chair beside him, hand automatically finding his. "They're too young for combat training," she said without conviction. "They're Cain children. They're never too young to learn survival." She watched their children play fight, Tim's dark hair catching the light, Emma's skin shifting through shades of jade with excitement. "Any word from the Corps?" "Same as always. 10 million credit bounty, dead or alive." Paul set the pistol aside, pulled out a cigarette. "The syndicate's reforming, apparently. New leadership. Let them come. They will, eventually." "Good." Temple's hand moved to her belly as one of the twins kicked. "These two will need practice targets when they're older." Paul laughed, smoke curling into the Haven sky. In the distance he could see the defense grid they'd installed, hidden but deadly, waiting for anyone stupid enough to attack their home. "We burned an empire, Temple." "We built something better," she replied, then tensed. "Paul." He was already standing, hand on his weapon. "How many?" 3 ships, coming fast." Her skin flushed with adrenaline, gold veins appearing. "Syndicate markings. Get the children inside." "No." She stood too, and even pregnant she was magnificent. "They should see this. They should know what their parents are." The ships appeared on the horizon, black against the golden sky. Paul smiled, that dangerous half-smile from the old days. "Together?" Temple asked, though she already knew the answer. "Always." Tim and Emma ran to their parents, not afraid but excited. They'd grown up on stories of the massacre, the legend of the night their parents destroyed the slavers. "Is it bad people, Mama?" Emma asked. "Yes, sweetheart," Temple said, her blade already in her hand. "But don't worry." "Why?" Tim wanted to know. Paul lit his cigarette, checked his pistol, and gave his children the truth they deserved. "Because bad people die when they come for what's mine." The ships grew larger, and the Cain family stood ready. 4 against an army, soon to be 6. The syndicate had no idea what they were about to face.